Now we saw a ton of deer that afternoon and early the next morning, and actually got a couple opportunities to get close, but Pete really never found another deer he got excited about until about 10 o'clock on the second morning. And we came up on a cliff, almost a canyon looking situation with scrub brush down below us, and Pete found Whopper Daddy bedded under a bush. It was the buck of my dreams. He was a 4x4 with brow tines, and he had velvet. I told Pete, I said, Pete, if I've got my choice, I want one that's got velvet, and he found it for me. Now it was just a matter of getting in on him. One of the things I'd like to clarify is the fact that in the West, they judge antlers a little different than we do. You'll hear them say a 4x4 or a 3x3, and basically they're counting points on each side. A 4x4 would be an Eastern 8-point. So when you're judging those animals and you hear them say a 4x4, to you and I, that's an 8-pointer. Now I had read a little bit about stalking mule deer, and I'd actually seen a couple of television shows where guys had used a bow and gotten really close to a mule deer, and they all take off their boots and put on a heavy pair of socks and stalk that way. And I kind of thought it was a joke, and that was the first thing that Pete told me when we started stalking on this mule deer, was that we're going to take our boots off, put on a heavy pair of socks, and it'll really reduce our noise. Well, the bad news is this is like desert country, and you've got cactus, and you've got thistles, and you've got yucca plants. Everything that can stick or cut you is in the ground, and the whole time you're walking, you're feeling it. So it does cut down the noise, but boy, oh boy, is it hard on your feet. As soon as Pete saw this big buck behind the bush underneath, he motioned for me to crawl up, so I eased up to the edge of the rim rock, and I pulled my glasses up, and I looked over, and I was pretty excited. I mean, that was the deer that I really wanted. Now the problem was how to get to him. And we felt like it was best to actually back off the cliff and circle way downwind and try to come in at the exact same level of the deer, because we had a steep bank, a steep canyon wall, and then a flat bottom. We felt like with the deer positioned behind that bush, we could use that bush as cover and come in right from behind him. The wind was right. Everything seemed like it was going to be perfect to kill that deer. Now this was one of those stalks that seemed like it took 4 days. We came all the way down and around probably 200 or 300 yards, and then got down on the flat, and there wasn't a lot of cover, so we were just picking and choosing our way from bush to bush. And basically I'm trying to blend in behind Pete, and I'm trying to follow his body language and his cues. When he hesitates, I need to stop. When he kneels down, I kneel down. And that's exactly what you have to do when you're with a guide like that. You have to let him cue you in on every movement you need to make. The closer we got to the deer, it was becoming really obvious that that bush that was shielding him from us, it kept him from being able to see us, but it made it extremely hard for us to see him and, more importantly, get a shot. So we kept quartering left and right, trying to jockey for position to where we could find one little lane that might give me an opportunity, so when he stood up to adjust or to eat a little bit, that I could slide an arrow in there. And we're inside of 40 yards this whole time, and then 30, and then 25, and now I've got nowhere else to go. I can't bridge that gap any further, and I've still got a screen of bushes in front of me. I was at one of those positions where I just really didn't know what to do. Pete actually sent me in that last 5 or 10 yards to get me inside of bow range, and I kept looking back. Really, he's like a big brother, man, I need some direction. What do I do? And he and I both kind of saw the opportunity at the same time. There was like one little lane that fed right up to where the deer was bedded. He was actually pawed in and dug down into the dirt. And Pete and I decided that we were going to kind of get together and slide up in that lane and then set up a shooting position to where we could take the shot. The bad news is that when we made that move, there must have just been enough open between the deer's eye and us to give him that visual on us, and man, he was gone, and I mean gone. When they see you or when they smell you, there's no hesitation. They are out of Dodge. One of the things that I had the most difficulty getting used to, being from the East, was the amount of glassing that goes into hunting mule deer. You're constantly with your spotting scope or with your binoculars looking for deer. Back home, if you can see a deer 75 to 100 yards away, that's a long ways. You rarely ever use binoculars. These guys live with them on their chest. And it's so important to have good optics and be able to see those deer a long ways away and pick your opportunities. We continued to see so many mule deer and actually had stalks every day on beautiful, beautiful bucks in decent spots. But there's so many variables to archery hunting. With gun hunting, you can sit back there at 100, 150 yards, get in position and make the shot. But with bow hunting, everything's got to be right. You got to be inside of 40 yards, and you got to have a clean area to the vitals. And I would get into situations where they would see me moving, or maybe where the wind would get me. And I was in situations where one time I was on a canyon cliff above a big mule deer, and I got so close to the deer that I could peek over and I could see the tips of his feet, and I could hear him belching. I was 4 yards from that deer, and I still could not get an arrow into him. Tried to wait him out, and eventually that little freaky gust of wind came, and boom, he was out of there. You might kind of think that was funny, watching me run across the ridge in my little white socks trying to get a shot at that deer as he goes down the backside. But by that time, I was pretty darn frustrated.